Good evening, CLA family. This is Alan Dykoff again, coming to you for Wednesday night Bible study for May 13th. And I'm recording it here in the afternoon. So um, I hope you guys enjoy it. We'll be in Judges chapter 19, and I'll try to get through the end of the book, chapters 19, 20, and 21 today. We kind of touched on chapter 19 last time a little bit, but I'll kind of go over it quickly again. So let's pray. God, thank you for this time we have to read your word and study your word. And God, I lift up all the members at CLA family and all the Christians here in Lancaster. Lord, at the time of this coronavirus, Lord, keep us safe and don't let any of us get it. And keep us healthy and strong, and let us soon return to meeting with each other again so we can encourage each other and draw closer to you. Amen. In Jesus' name. So here in chapter 19, the previous chapter was the story of Micah and how he had the gods and the Danites came through and took them and went on. And it also talked about a Levite from Bethlehem that was part of the story. And chapter 19 here starts off in verse 1. It says, "And there came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah." So I wonder if this was the same Levite that was in the story of Micah. Because if you'll remember, the Danites, when they came through, the Levite went with the Danites, but then towards the end of the story, after the Danites had conquered the people that they went out to conquer, it said that they had some other priests that served them, and they had promised as Levite, if he left Micah, that he could be their priest. So I wonder if that was a short-lived promise, and he went back to where he was from, and then maybe Micah wasn't so happy to welcome him in, and so now he had to live on his own, possibly in that same area. So not really sure. It does, and the Bible doesn't really say, but it doesn't say that that didn't happen either. So I'm speculating perhaps a little bit, but anyway. There was this Levite, and he lived there, and he takes this woman that was from Bethlehem to be his concubine, which is kind of like one step down from a wife, I guess. And she ran away from him and went back to her father's house and in Bethlehem. And he lets her go for 4 months, and then he decides to try to go get her. And so he goes to Bethlehem, and he finds her and stays at her father's house. And her father is more than happy to have him stay, and he stays for 3 days, and they have a good time together, and they're celebrating together and eating and making merry. And I suppose her dad is maybe happy that his daughter has hooked up with the Levite, because she seems like she was kind of, acted like a prostitute a lot, maybe, or something like, or almost acted like that. So he stays there for 3 days, and the dad is super happy that this Levite is married his daughter, and he begs him to stay another day. He kind of tricks him almost and says, "Hey, have breakfast with us before you leave." And then after he has breakfast, he's like, "Well, since you ate breakfast, come on and let's stay and eat and have a good time together for a little longer." And he, talks him into staying for another day. And he says, "No, you might as well stay the whole day because you've already had breakfast." So he stays. They end up staying another night, and they get up the next day on the 5th day that they're there. And he says, and they get up early in the morning, like they're going to hit the road. Maybe they're going to make this whole journey in one day. And he tells them, "Oh, come on, you can't go off hungry, so I have breakfast." And so he concedes, and he has breakfast. And then he says, "Well, since you had breakfast, let's go ahead and stay and have stay for another meal." And I think he does that. And he says, then you can leave after the meal. Well, he does that, and it turns out to be later in the day, maybe a late lunch. And the Levite says, I got to go now. And, take his concubine with him, his wife. And her dad says, oh, come on, it's getting late in the day. You stayed this long, you might as well stay another day. And I think at this time, the Levite feels like the guy is really tricking him into staying longer and longer. So he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And he says, no, we're leaving this time. I don't care how late it is. If we have to start off in the evening, we're leaving. So he goes ahead and leaves, and they don't get too far. They get to Jerusalem, which I think is about 8 miles from Bethlehem, and it's starting to get evening. And his servant says, Master, let's stay. It's getting dark. We don't want to travel in the dark. And apparently, that time Jerusalem hadn't been conquered by the Israelites yet. And the Levites' answer is, no, we're not going to stay in this city that's inhabited by heathens. We need to stay somewhere where Israelites are inhabiting. So he tells them to go on. And this is in if we pick up in verse 14, and it says, and they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down upon them when they were by Gibeah, which belongeth to Benjamin. And they turned aside thither to go in and to lodge in Gibeah. And when he had went in, he sat him down in the street of the city, for there was no man took them into his house to lodge. And at that time, if there wasn't hotels or inns, remember the story of Jesus and Mary, and there was an inn in Bethlehem, but there wasn't enough room, so they couldn't stay. It was fairly normal, and I think even to this day, some of you guys might know better, for hospitality, if you saw a stranger out on the street or a foreign traveler out on the street that didn't have a place to stay, and you had room in your house, you could take them in and let them sleep in your house. And that was not uncommon. And I think that actually happened in this country too early on in the earlier days. I remember reading the story of the guy that shot Abraham Lincoln was traveling after he shot Lincoln, was traveling through the South with his accomplice, and people took them into their houses to stay in their house, and even would kick their kids out of their bed and make their kids sleep on the floor and give the guests their kids' bed. So, that wasn't uncommon, I think, even in this country, to take strangers in and let them stay in your house. This guy takes, he's out there in the street and nobody is taking him in. And it's dark, it's gotten dark. They left the heathen land of Jerusalem and were staying in Gibeah, which belonged to Benjamin. So they were staying among other Israelites. So they felt the Levite felt that was a better thing to do and maybe safer. But as we'll see here, it wasn't. You probably would have been better off staying with the heathens compared to how this story took out. But I believe it was all in God's will, because there was evil in Israel at this time, and God was wanting to judge it. And he was using this Levite as the beginning of where judgment was going to start in Israel here. So nobody took him in. So if we go to verse 16, it says, there came an old man from his work out of the field at even, and he was also from Mount Ephraim, and he sojourned in Gibeah, but the men of the place were Benjamites. In verse 17, and when he had lifted up his eyes, he saw the wayfaring man in the streets of the city. And the old man said, where are you going, and where are you coming from? And he said unto them, we are passing from Bethlehem, Judah, toward the side of the Mount Ephraim. From thence I am, and I went to Bethlehem, Judah. But I am now going to the house of the Lord, and there is no man that receiveth me unto his house. So this old man comes out of the field about the time that these guys were settling down. They were going to camp in the market square, basically, of the city. And this old man sees them coming in from his work in the fields and says, where are you guys from? Where are you going? And he tells them, I'm from Mount Ephraim, but I was in Bethlehem, and we're traveling back now from Bethlehem to Mount Ephraim. It's interesting. He says that I'm going up to the house of the Lord. So I don't know if there was a worship place in Ephraim where he was to go back to, or that was someplace in between, or what. But he tells him, and this old man, it says, was from Mount Ephraim too. So he goes, oh, they probably had something in common. Oh, I'm from Mount Ephraim. I've been there. You've been here and there, and they probably had something in common and shared a little bit. And the man says, oh, you're going to come and stay with me tonight. It's not safe. He knew the people of the city and how wicked they were. So he said, it's not safe for you to stay here in the street. You're coming to my house. So he shows him much hospitality and kindness, and he brings him in. And the man explains, I've got enough food for my donkeys, and I have bread and wine for us to eat. We don't really need anything, we just need shelter. And the man says, well, you keep your food for your animals and your food for yourselves. This one's on me. And he says, you can come to my house and I'll feed you and take care of your animals. So he brings them in, he feeds his donkeys, and he feeds them, and they're sitting down. Maybe they had wine. It says they were making their hearts merry. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that's quite possible, I would say. So anyway, they eat and they drink and they're happy and they're sitting down. Well, about that time, it says they were pulling into this place, at sundown. So this might be, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night by the time they had fed the animals. They get settled into their lodging, and they're getting ready to go. Now the story takes a turn for the worse, and the men of the town come around and they beat on the door of the house, and they say, bring out the man that came in, the men that came here. We want to know them. So they were perverted, and they wanted to have relations with the men. So they were homosexual apparently, and very much like Sodom and Gomorrah, they beat on the house and are like, let us in, let us have fresh meat, I guess it would be. And it's interesting to me that that's how perversion goes. They're not satisfied with working their perversion among themselves, and they're probably disgusted with working it among their other people, because they can see what the perversion leads to and how it leads to the people becoming disgusting, I think. And so they want fresh blood, fresh meat. So they see this man and his servant come in. They're like, we want him, and so it's quite disgusting. So in verse 22, it says, as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house round about, and beat at the door, and spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring forth the man that came unto thine house, that we may know him. And the master of the house, went out unto them and said to them, no, my brethren, I pray thee, do not so wickedly, seeing that this man is come into mine house. Do not this folly. So the man goes out on the porch. He faces this crowd of crazed men, and he says, look, this guy's my guest. You're not going to do this to a guest of my house. People, I took this man in, and he thought I would bring him in to keep him safe, and I intend to do that. And so he defends the man, and he says, you can't have him. And he even offers up his daughter, who's a virgin, and the man's concubine, which is odd but apparently, these concubines got treated like, third-class citizens or whatever. He says, you can have my daughter. Well, he even offered his daughter, which, he's not going to treat her like a third-class citizen. But he realized the wickedness that were in these men's hearts, and that they had to be satisfied somehow to keep from, probably tearing the place down and having their way. So he offers up his daughter and this concubine. He says, here, you can have them and do what you want, seems good to you with them, but don't harm this man, because he's trusting in me to keep him safe. So he offers that, and his daughter doesn't go, but I think the man, I was reading a different version, said the man pushed his concubine out. So he didn't, treat her very well, I guess. But again, their lives were probably in danger at this point. And so this Levite's concubine goes out, and these men take her, and they have their way with her, and they abuse her all night long, the Bible says, and until the morning. And when the morning rose, they let her go. And kind of that is not uncommon of wickedness. What it does, the wickedness works at nighttime when it's dark and you can't see its works, because even the people that are committing it know that it's wrong and they don't want to do it in the light. So they do this terrible thing all night long to this poor girl. And then in the morning, they're like, we got to get out of here. Somebody will see us, right? So they let her go. And in verse 26, it says, Then came the woman in the dawning of the day and fell down at the door of the man's house where her Lord was till it was light. So how wherever they had taken her, she finds her way back to the house, and she can only make it to the front door. Perhaps the door was locked. They were afraid of these men probably, so they locked the door behind her. She falls down at the door. Perhaps she's too weak to even knock, and she falls down at the threshold of the door. And then verse 27 says, And her Lord rose up in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to get on his way. And behold, the woman, his concubine, was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold. So this girl made it back, and I picture her hands on the doorknob. She made it all the way back, but she couldn't get back in the house, and she falls down and dies. Now he doesn't know it yet. In verse 28, it says, And he said to her, Get up and let's get going. But none answered. So he's pretty coarse with her. I think he says, okay, get up. And knowing that these men had abused her, or at least suspecting it. And she doesn't answer because she's dead, I think. And he says, get up. But she doesn't answer. And then it says that he took her and put her upon his ass. And the man rose up and got him to his place. So by this time, I think he knows that she's either dead or very nearly dead. And he puts her on the donkey. You see the old Westerns where they put the body, across the saddle or whatever, and, hanging off on either side. And he puts her on there and he heads towards home. So he takes her home. If she's not dead already, she dies very soon after. And in verse 29, And when he was come to his house, he took a knife and laid hold on his concubine and divided her together with her bones into 12 pieces and sent her into all the coasts of Israel. So now that, the story gets worse, right? Very gory. He takes his dead concubine and he cuts her up into pieces. And like I said last week, I think a possibility of how that happened, 12 pieces would be hand, forearm, upper part of your arm. That's 3 pieces. You do that on the arms and legs, you got 12 pieces, and the torso and head would have still been in 1 piece. So perhaps he didn't cut her head off. But he cut pieces of her off, and he sent a piece to each tribe of Israel. So he was very angry with what the wickedness that these men had done to his concubine. And he was going to tell everybody in Israel about it by FedExing them a piece of her body to each area of Israel, each tribe of Israel. So when each tribe of Israel opens their package from Amazon and finds a body part of this woman in it, they would have been very, upset. And this is horrible. What's the story here? What has happened? And so they find out. They're like, where did this come from, and who sent it? And they find out it was this Levite, and that these men of Benjamites had raped her to death, and they were going to say, this matter needs to be dealt with. He sent them a strong message, basically. And so what they do is they all get together, and that gets us up to chapter 20, and they all came together, and in verse 20, verse 1, Then all the children of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man from Dan even to Beersheba, with the land of Gilead, unto the Lord in Mizpah. And the chief of all the people, even of the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 footmen that drew the sword. So all of Israel gets together, and there's 400,000 men, armed men. They get together and they're like, something's got to be done about this. And so, that's the proper response. This terrible evil has happened. They've gotten these body parts in the mail, and they they want to know what's going on, and somebody has to be punished. What's the story? So in verse 3, Now the children of Israel were gone up and to Mizpah. Then said the children of Israel, tell us, how was this wickedness? And the Levite, the husband of the woman that was slain, answered and said, I came to Gibeah that belongeth to Benjamin, and I and my concubine to lodge. And the men of Gibeah rose against me and beset the house round about upon me by night, and thought to have and my concubine, uh, slain me and my concubine have they forced that she is dead. And I took my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel. For they have committed lewdness and folly in Israel. Behold, ye are all children of Israel. Give here your advice and counsel. So this large army of 400,000 people come to the Levite and they say, what is going on? Why have you done this terrible thing, chopped up this woman and sent her all over Israel? And he tells them the story. Basically, he's completely honest. He tells them exactly what happened. That these men came. They were going to abuse us. They took my concubine and they killed her, and and then I cut her up and sent her out to get you guys to come and this have judgment here. Let's figure out what we're going to do. You guys judge for yourself what has happened here and what should we do. And so it says all the men of Israel rose up as one person, and they're like, we need to go get these men of Gibeah and make them pay for what they've done. And that's a good thing. And so they go up there, they sought the Lord and ask what they should do. And they send a message to Benjamin and the tribe of Benjamin and say, hey, this has happened in your land. These men of Gibeah have done this terrible thing. Turn them over to us, and we're going to kill them and punish them for this evil that they've done. And oddly enough, the men of Benjamin refuse, and they want to defend these people of Gibeah. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe that's their cousins, brothers, and sisters, whatever. But they decide, no, they don't want their friends or brothers and sisters to be killed. They're going to defend them against this army of 400,000 men that came out of all the other tribes of Israel. So they come up to defend them, and Benjamin puts together an army of about 26,000 men, and they're going to fight. They're going to defend themselves against this army of 400,000. So, it's brave on their part, I suppose, but they're vastly outnumbered. And interesting enough, they have a significant amount of success against this army of Israel that comes out against them. So they decide to fight rather than turn the men over. And the men of Israel go up to inquire of the Lord what they should do. Should we go fight against Benjamin? They actually say, they don't even ask if they should. They just ask God who should go first, which tribe should go first. And the Lord answers them that the tribe of Judah should go first. So they put the men that had come from the tribe of Judah in front of the army, I suppose, and they go in to attack Benjamin. Find where I am here. So they attack, and Judah goes first. I think it doesn't really say. It says they asked who should go first, and they said Judah. So I'm assuming that's what they did. And in verse 18, and the children of Israel arose and went up to the house of God and asked counsel of God and said, which of us shall go up first to the battle against the children of Benjamin? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. So the children of Israel, verse 19, rose up in the morning, chapter 20, verse 19, and verse 20, and went up against Gibeah. And the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel put themselves in array to fight against them at Gibeah. And the children of Benjamin came forth out of Gibeah and destroyed down to the ground of the Israelites that day 22,000 men. So Israel goes up to try to get justice and punish Benjamin for this evil that happened in Gibeah. And Benjamin puts this army together and they fight against Israel and they win the first battle, right? They kill 22,000 men of this 400,000 man army. And and they're winning the battle. So the army of Benjamin with 26,000 is beating the army of Israel that has 400,000, and they kill 22,000 of them. So the men of Israel in verse 22 uh, encouraged themselves and set their battle array in array again in the place where they put themselves in array the first day. And the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until even, and asked counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I go up to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother? And the Lord said, go up against him. So they lose this first battle, and they do the exact right thing, in my opinion. They go back to the Lord, like, Lord, what happened? We lost. I thought you said we should go up against this battle. Why did we lose? And so they go up to fight the first day. They lose 22,000. They come back and they say, oh, God, and they go back to God again, and they cry before the Lord and say, God, what, should we go up and fight with these guys again? We just lost this terrible battle against Benjamin. And the Lord answers them, yes, you should go up, go fight with them again. So they obey, which is, great on their part. Even though they lost the first battle, they're not giving up, and they go back up against them again. So verse 24, and the children of Israel came against the children of Benjamin that second day, and Benjamin went forth against them out of Gibeah the second day, and destroyed down to the ground of the children of Israel again 18,000 men. All these drew the sword. So day two of the battle, God told them to go up again and fight, and they lose again. But this time they didn't lose as bad. First day they lost 22,000. This day they only lose 18,000. And so now they're like, we just lost again 2 days in a row. And they go back to the Lord. Again, the very exact right thing to do, in my opinion. Verse 26, then all the children of Israel and all the people went up and came to the house of God and wept and sat before the Lord and fasted that day until even, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So this day they were even more earnest when they went to the Lord. It says they fasted and they offered offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. So they go back to the Lord and say, Lord, we lost this battle a second day in a row. What are we supposed to do? And they go out and ask the counsel of the Lord, which is a great thing to do. Verse 27, and the children of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. So they were in the right place. They were worshiping at the ark of the covenant. That's what they're supposed to be doing, in the right place. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, shall I yet go into the battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother, or shall I cease? So they're like, okay, Lord, is this enough? Are you trying to send us a message that we shouldn't fight against our brothers here, even though they've done an evil thing? And it's interesting that the guy they go to is Phinehas, who is the grandson of Aaron. And that, to me, if he's directly the grandson, this is pretty late in the period of the judges. Well, I think it is. Regardless, they hadn't conquered the whole land yet, so this was still fairly recently from when they came in from Egypt. Maybe within a couple hundred years, unless these guys all lived to be 150 years old, and then maybe it was 300 or 400 years. I don't know. So, but I guess it's possible Abraham had children in his old age. Perhaps these Levites also had children in their old ages. So it could have been a little while afterwards. So they come and ask the priest, and who's the grandson of Aaron, and he tells them, Phinehas, yes, go up, and he tells them, I'm going to give the battle to your hand this time. You guys have fought and lost 2 days in a row. This is the third day, and today you're going to get the victory. And so they go up the third day, and this time they use a little different strategy. They put ambushers beside the road, and perhaps why they were lost these two battles is maybe there was only one narrow road into Gibeah, and even a big army, if you're on a narrow road, you can only present so many soldiers at one time. And so the guys coming at you from the other side have pretty much even ground if you're both meeting on a narrow road, and perhaps they even had high ground, so they had an advantage. That's perhaps why they won the first two battles. But this time, Israel puts their soldiers out beside the road in the forest or swamps or whatever it was, beside the roads there, and a big part of their army goes off to the sides and perhaps around, even around the city. And so they've used a different strategy, and they go into fight. And this time Benjamin comes out of Gibeah, and they start fighting, and they kill about 30 of the soldiers of Israel. And Benjamin thinks, I've got him whipped again, just like the last 2 days. And they get over confident, and they charge and they pursue Israel. And Israel had a smart plan. They said, we're going to go in with the main part of the army on the road, and when they attack us, we're going to withdraw like we're being defeated, and we're going to draw them out. So Benjamin comes out after them, and begins to kill a few of them, up to 30. And Israel is retreating and pulling away. What Benjamin didn't know is the rest of the Israeli army was on the sides. And so they draw them out. Benjamin pursues them, thinking they're going to win another great victory, but they get drawn away from the city and away from their stronghold. And they pursue them out down this road. And the Israelites had a plan. When the army of Benjamin came out of the city, the guys that went around were going to go into the city behind them when that army came out, and they were going to go through and start to destroy the city. And they set it on fire. And that was going to be a sign to the rest of the army that was fighting out in front of Benjamin's army, that they should turn around and fight, stop retreating, and turn around and fight. So that exactly happened. Benjamin comes out after them. They kill a few of them. Israel's retreating. The guys that snuck around go into the city. They set it on fire, and now the Benjamins turn around, and they see behind them their home city is on fire, and it's burning. And then they're like, "Uh-oh, we've been hoodwinked. We've been tricked." And now the city's on fire. Now, half of the men are like, do we turn around and try to go back and defend the city? Do we continue to try to fight the army? Now the Israeli army turns around the Israelites, and they begin to fight in earnest. They weren't, faking this retreat, and they begin to fight in earnest. And the armies that are beside the roads come in from the sides, and they surrounded the army of Benjamin now, and they did a great slaughter. I think it says they killed 18,000 right there, up to 25,000, and of this army of only 26,000. So now, although Israel had lost actually more soldiers total, they lost 22 and 18 in the first two battles. Now they kill close to either up from 18 to 25,000 at least in the next day or two out of 26,000. So they kill, 95% of the Benjamites army, when they have they lost more men total than Benjamin lost, but it's a much smaller percentage of their army that they've lost compared to Benjamin has lost, 95% of its army. So they win this great victory. Israel does. Now finally, justice is done, and they pretty much destroy the whole army of Benjamin. And then I think the next day or so, or shortly thereafter, they go in to fight. And hi, Price. That's my grandson. I'm recording right now. I'll come and help you in a little bit. So they fight this fight, and they destroy a large part of the army of Benjamin, and then they go in and they go to all the rest of the towns of Benjamin, not just Gibeah, and they destroy all those towns too. So not only did they take vengeance, but they took severe vengeance on Benjamin, and they destroyed. And it says they killed the women, the children, and the cattle and everything. So they were very angry with them that they had let these evil men get away with this, and they pretty much wiped them out completely. A few of them escaped into a mountain area, and it's interesting. In the next chapter, Israel begins to feel sorry for Benjamin because they killed so many of them, and they're like, "This is a bad thing that there's been a breach in the house of Benjamin." One of the 12 tribes of Israel has essentially been completely wiped out in these battles. And so they actually are praying before the Lord and say, "God, what should we do? We don't want our brother Benjamin to be completely wiped out of his inheritance. And there was like this small group of men left that sounded like less than 1,000. And they said, what are we going to do for him? Because before they went into the first battle, all the Israelites made a covenant and said, none of us are going to let our daughters marry any of the Benjamite men because of this evil that they've done. So now pretty much the whole other 11 tribes of Israel have made this commitment that said, we're not going to let any of our daughters marry any of the sons of Benjamin. And they killed off all the rest of the women and children of Benjamin, so there was none left for them to marry. So now in chapter 21, they're sorry that this has happened to Benjamin. You know, the punishment was so severe. So they say, what should we do? And they say, we've all committed that we're not going to give them our daughters. We don't want them to be wiped off of the inheritance of Israel. So we need to find wives for them. How can we do it? So what they do is they say, who didn't send any men to this battle, this army of 400,000 that they had initially put together? They said, what cities or tribes didn't they send people to that battle? And whoever didn't send people to that, they deserved to be punished. So they found one city that didn't send people, and they go and attack them, and they kill all of the men, the women, and the children in that city. But the women that were virgins that were of childbearing age, they preserved. So, you know, they kill all the men, women, and children of this town, but the young girls, they saved them. And I think it said there was like 400 of them. And so they bring them to Benjamin, these men of Benjamin that were still alive, and they say, here's 400 virgins. You guys can have them to wives, so that your name isn't blotted out of Israel, essentially. And so that wasn't quite enough for all of them. Like I said, there was probably, you know, between 400 and 1,000. So then they're like, oh, what can we do? That still isn't enough to, you know, provide wives to the tribe of Benjamin so that they can, you know, begin to reproduce and come back to be a tribe of Israel. So then they, what can we do? All of us have said we're not going to give our daughters wives. And they know about this religious ceremony where these girls come out and dance before the Lord. And that happens in this one place. And they're like, okay, Benjamites, what you guys can do is go to this ceremony where all these girls come out and dance, and go and basically kidnap them and grab these girls and take them. And when their fathers come to us and say, what's happened? How have these girls been kidnapped? We'll tell them, no, these are the Benjamites. They're our friends. And, you know, they had made up apparently, and they were having mercy on them. They're like, let them have your daughters, because we're trying to get the Benjamites to be restored as a good tribe of Israel. So, you know, they essentially go to this modern day, I would say, a cheerleading contest, and they find all these young girls, and they're like, okay, the men of Benjamin grab them all. So now the men of Israel haven't given Benjamin their daughters, but they've allowed daughters of some of the people of Israel to be taken by the Benjamites. So they didn't break their vow, but they let them have these daughters. And so now between the 400 girls from this city that they had destroyed earlier, and these girls that they have let Benjamin come and take from this ceremony, Benjamin has enough wives for their men, and they begin to repopulate, so they aren't wiped off the face of Israel. So that essentially is chapter 21. I didn't read it specifically, but that finishes off the book of Judges. And I think I got that last story of chapter 21 pretty accurately, but you can read it for yourselves too. But it was interesting how they wiped out Benjamin for the evil that they did, but then afterwards they had pity on him. And, you know, that's kind of the way God treats us. That's the way our fathers treated children a lot of times, is you'll punish a child, but then you want to go back and have mercy on them later. So I think justice was served, and they made a way for Benjamin to be restored, and that was all good. So that gets us up through the end of Judges. The next book is Ruth. I'd like to teach Ruth. I don't know if the pastor will let me, but I don't really feel that confident in my abilities in Judges, but I love the book of Ruth, and I've read it many times. So if I can teach that next time, that'd be great too. So let's pray. God, we thank you for this time we've had in reading these stories of old, how your children executed justice, and they fell down a lot of times, but they also did good judgment too at times. So God, help us to do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with you as your word instructs. And bless everybody that was listening and is here and online too. And bless us all. In Jesus' name, thank you. Thank you, everybody. God bless you guys. Hope to see you soon.